just aren't happy in life.
Did you have the?
Over here.
All right, good evening, everyone. I'll open up the October 1st meeting of the Hamilton Planning Board. It's about 7:06. On our agenda tonight, we have a board consideration and possible vote on minor modification to Canterbrook Senior Housing Special Permit at 354 Highland Street, partial release of a covenant. We have an A&R, approval not required, plan at 466 Highland Street. And we'll continue talking about our master planning presentation. We can't close the door. And other board business and so forth. No worries. So up first is 354 Highland Street. Jill?
Good evening, Jill Mann here on behalf of Canterbrook Capital. We're here to request an additional, can you hear me? I'm sorry. Okay, we're here to request an additional release of the covenant as it pertains to buildings 3 and building 14. The reason is we actually have entered into a purchase and sale agreement for these particular, for a unit in each of the buildings. And the covenant prohibits us from even building without a release. Again, this particular covenant, as with the other covenants, will not allow us to sell or do anything other than construct. The reason we haven't yet been able to complete the infrastructure is just we had to complete all of the requirements and the testing and all of the other things attendant to getting the septic system approved, which was one of the major portions of the infrastructure. At this point, we believe we're exceptionally close to getting everything approved, and our first sale is going to occur right after the first of the year. So we will have proper security, and we'll be able to establish what the amount is to bond what improvements remain, and then be able to secure full release of the entire project based on that bonding. So what we're seeking tonight is simply, again, a partial limited release that would allow Mr. Smith to begin construction of those two buildings for that sole purpose.
Comments from the board? I don't think.
Is there any problem with this septic?
No, it's just a lot.
Sometimes unexpected.
You have to test. So every time it's a common septic system, and it's a large septic system. So, and I think it's an alternative. So it just requires there's just a lot of layers of testing, and then you have to deliver plans. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. As a matter of fact, I think it's done now, right?
It is.
Yeah.
All but the testing.
Okay, so there you go.
No one has any issues?
No?
Okay, me neither. So we'll entertain a motion. Which buildings were they again?
It was
3 and
buildings 3 and 14.
14, yeah. Okay.
I move that the Hamilton Planning Board grant a request from the permittee for a minor modification to the Canterbrook Senior Housing Special Permit to approve a Form K partial release of covenant for buildings 3 and 14?
Yes.
Okay.
Second.
Any more discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Unanimous in favor?
Perfect.
So we all need to sign, right?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Seems to be a lot of buyer interest now in see, I get notices about, am I mistaken?
So we have 5 units.
Actively,
Sure, do you, can...
Yeah, if you
can-
could, yeah.
Mr.
Yeah, sure.
Mr.
We have-
Smith?
While we're signing, sure.
So we have 5 units under agreement, and we have one more unit with what we call a reservation agreement, which should convert to a firm purchase and sale agreement in the next 2 weeks. So from our standpoint, that's really good, because typically, when we have our,
sales are almost running ahead of building.
well, they are actually running ahead of building, but we usually start our sales in earnest when our furnished model is completed, and that won't be completed for about another 60 days. So we feel pretty good about the market right now.
I understand there was a period where you had local preference, but so far buyers are not from Hamilton, or are they?
There is not one buyer from Hamilton thus far, but mostly from the North Shore. Great, thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Just so you know, when I do is I record it, so then I'll send a copy over to Patrick, and I'll give him the Thank you very much.
Thank you. Sure. Thank you.
Jill, you know he's recuperating
Yeah.
from surgery.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just send it over.
Yeah, yeah, it's fine. That's fine.
There's no, yeah.
Okay, up.
Double hitting tonight.
You guys are being efficient. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm off to Take care, thank you.
Oh, yeah. That's great. All right, yeah, so 466 Highland Street, A&R plan. If you want to just go to the microphone, it'd be great.
Peter Britton owns, I think it's 466, and there's a paddock, which is, if anybody knows the property, there's a paddock which is actually part of Brick End's farm currently, which is directly abutting him, and that's 464 and Highland. He's at 466 Highland. And what he's doing is I think it's about a 1 acre area. I don't have it in front of me, but he's carving that off of the farm and adding it back into the property for his actually, as he always reminds me, it's not his home, it's the children's home. He does live there, but it's just a little bit of I guess estate planning that he's pulling a piece of the he'd like that paddock to be in the ownership with the house. So that's really what's happening here. I'll gladly
Yeah, just real
approach.
quick,
and-
so we can kind of just see what you're talking about here. There's a lot going on.
Yeah, there is. It's a busy. Okay, I'll continue to talk in here if I'm being recorded. Peter's home is right here. He owns right up. He owns this. Or his children own that, and there's a paddock, this is just a fenced-in area. There's a paddock, and this is actually currently part of the Brick End's farm, which is a large parcel. I forget how many. It's 150
About
acres or
100,
what it
yeah,
is.
over
Yeah.
100 acres.
So it's actually, I was wrong. It's about 2 acres that paddock is. So he's breaking that off and making that part of his residential property. So it's just a little bit of a land swap.
So
Not a swap, but a land
what,
taking.
this was part of the conserved,
It's still conserved, right?
still conserved.
See the dashed lines here?
Okay.
That's within the conservancy. It can be used as agricultural lands, and a paddock obviously falls under that.
Yeah.
So, but any subdividing of the conservancy runs with the land. So it doesn't, his subdividing it doesn't change that restriction.
Right.
So that's what we got.
Great. Any comments?
No.
Pretty straightforward. Okay. Want to make a motion?
Motion to approve the A&R to adjust all these lots. What is it, map 20, lot 5, and map 20, lot 11?
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous?
All right. So
That's fine enough? Is that fine enough?
Gee, Jeez, I didn't even need my magnifying glass.
Want a few paper copies signed too, or?
You guys can keep those. What I'll do is I'll make a copy of this, get it on file at the registry of deeds.
Yep.
And send it over to you. What you can do is, you sign these, give that to your planning director.
Yeah, right.
And then, once I've got it filed at the registry of deeds, I'll send him that document as well.
This needs to go.
Could use that pen.
Yep. You want to sign the paper?
Oh,
Or one for Patrick?
do we need to sign it?
I mean, I think if Patrick
One's
has one,
fine,
we're
fine.
probably good.
Yeah.
I'll get your paper cut.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to avoid. So you only need one paper?
Yeah. No,
You guys can
your
keep-
regular pen or this pen or whatever you want.
Doesn't matter.
Okay.
Date that.
Yeah.
The other one I used tomorrow.
I mean, I want to date that too.
Oh, yeah. I was gonna date it for you.
Okay, very good. Yeah, well done.
Take it easy.
Thanks, Charlie. You want these other, you want those other copies, or?
Taking longer to sign them than it is to do the actual work.
Exactly. So next up, I know you guys, I wasn't here at the last meeting. You guys reviewed the master planning presentation last, couple weeks ago now. Is there anything else that we need to talk about regarding that? I still haven't watched the last meeting, so I don't know where you guys were with that, but.
I think we left with, I was quite critical of the fiscal impact analysis of the master plan. And we were going back and forth with the idea of maybe having a separate fiscal impact analysis that all the boards and the Board of Selectmen and even the school board might use as well. We would have some consultant who specializes in this. I haven't done, Patrick seemed to think he had some ideas. And that it might be jointly funded out of a couple different pockets because there are a lot of boards concerned about it. And I'd done a little more thinking about it, about how we might do it, rather than basing it on assumptions. We might actually get the school enrollment records and match it with the assessor's records and be able to look at where each child in the school system lives, what kind of house, and when it was last sold. And there's all sorts of analysis we could do with that in terms of determining exactly how many, children per unit are moving into the town, what kinds of units, and actually do, I think,
What do you mean, what kinds of units?
2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms, single family.
Basically all single family, right? For the most part.
No,
For the most part.
one idea we had, for example, is there a couple to look at the Juncture Crossing, which has 12 townhouse units, seeing whether that really has the low number of students that was originally argued when it was projected, or who's actually there. And also looking at whether the number of bedrooms really matters, which seems to be a commonly held belief, but could be subject to empirical scrutiny. And then we could come up with some answers as opposed to speculation. I could actually see doing quite a lot with just one little data merge of assessor records and school enrollment. And I don't think there'd be any problem in that. Might be worth discussing with the school board. I don't.
Public
I
info.
mean, this is something Patrick should probably do behind the scenes, talk with different boards. But that's where we came out in the discussion, that some study like this is probably warranted. Be useful. Because every, whether it's the selectmen, the finance committee, every board, sooner or later comes around to a question of fiscal impact.
Right. I mean,
Well,
every type of, well, going back to kind of the master plan presentation, you know, they did the fiscal impact on a few different types of housing, right? So I guess, and I was talking to Rick a little bit today, you know, do we do it, and that's one way, do you do it for each type of potential proposal that we're gonna have down the road, right? If we decide, or after lots of discussion, do we decide to do whatever, you know, duplexes or townhouses or OSFPD revision, whatever it is, right? Do you try to do a fiscal impact with each one of those?
Yes,
Yeah, then you add them
Right.
up.
that's what we agreed.
That's
Yeah.
basically
Yeah.
what you.
That's what we agreed to, is that my personal preference is to start with OSFPD, because it's something that's there, it's cluster housing, it has a format. It was agreed that that would be a good thing to do. That's why it's named Open Space and Farmland Preservation, is because cluster housing uses a minimal amount of land and retains a maximum amount of open
Right.
space.
Right.
So, and so it really addresses the two conflicting issues that were in the housing master plan as expressed by those that were surveyed, is they'd like to see new and different types of housing, but they want to retain the maximum amount of open space. So that would be my preference, just because it's there and it's probably the most, well, it's kind of the type of housing I think that would be most advantageous for us to be creating is, and it would be different than what were the single-family homes that we now allow. So, and if we can take the template that people have already agreed to, it's really about density
Right.
and streamlining it.
Well, right, and that's what we've heard from a couple of people that tried to use it, was that
Not
it
economic.
didn't work. It didn't work economically, and, right, so that involves, you know, more density than what was allowed.
Right.
Really, when you get
And
down to
also,
it.
we have to, it would be fun to tackle, you know, there was a big discussion about should it be optional or required, and I think we ought to revisit that, you know.
What's that option?
Well,
What's optional?
you know, that it currently requires, if there's a piece of property, you look at the underlying zoning.
Right.
You know, how many units could they
Right.
build? Let's say a theoretical
yeah.
10-acre lot, and it's zoned 1 acre, they could build 10 homes.
Yeah, you have to do a yield plan.
They have to do a yield plan. And then, so they have to do that, and then they have to decide, well, if we do cluster housing, how many units would that be? And I think it's 1.5 times the
Base density.
base, so they could do 15. But the whole thing is optional. They can go through that and say, okay, we did that, but we don't want to do the cluster. We're just going subdivision. Well, maybe we look at something that says, yeah, you can do a subdivision, and I'm making this up right now, but no more than 5 units. The whole point was to not be building, and I don't think anybody is, but
To not be what?
building large-scale subdivisions. For example, Tom Ford were proposing 14 units at the Esdale property. That would have been a very large consumption of open space and land. And he looked at it and just said, well, it's not going to produce enough, you know, it doesn't give me the economics that I want. So we would have consumed 14 acres of land for 14 houses, single-family houses at $1 million apiece, as opposed to something else. So do we want to look at the thing and say, well, any, you know, piece of land over, I forget what the base, I think it's 10 acres. You know, you can't build more than X number of houses, single-family houses. You have to go to cluster. Look at that to say, is that something we want to do?
I mean, that's tough because you have your underlying zoning that you're keeping.
Right.
That would allow them to do that,
Right.
right? So there has to be an incentive off the bat to
Right.
get them to do cluster,
True. Okay.
so.
Yep. So anyway, lots of room for
So the
discussion.
I'm sorry. So the incentive would be
More units.
More units.
Obviously, yeah. It's just, right now, there isn't enough of that to make it work. And I know, one of the things that Tom had talked about, and I don't know if we want to get into it, but when he was looking at that over there, he wanted to do a mix of different things, or he talked about doing a mix of different types of housing, if you will, but that really wasn't allowed either.
Right.
Do we look at something like that? Because he had said, oh, maybe you do a cluster of, senior, maybe you do a cluster of, normal, under 55, or normal housing, and maybe there's something else, so it's, our bylaws are very just, one thing on that lot, done. One thing on the next lot,
But
so it's not.
we need information to make that decision.
Oh, no, I
The question
get
is
that, yeah.
whether a smaller number of bigger units or a larger number of smaller units, what is the impact on the town's school system and budget?
We've already agreed to that, so that's,
Yeah.
that's not a point of
No,
discussion.
but I mean, that's part of it,
That's the-
absolutely.
that's
The
the-
other part of it is, and let's keep using that example across the street, but, open space, right? That obviously factors into it as well, so you're gonna have to weigh those. Because you might be right, that the giant houses that are $1.2 million, $1.5 million might generate a little more revenue for the town, I don't know, than the other thing, but it's using up the open space, so that's kind of that's the trade-off, so.
Right. And we've already seen the town be willing to spend $1.7 million on the Sagamore property to preserve open space. So clearly, the town population values open space to some degree. It wasn't it wasn't a cost-benefit analysis. It was, we want open space and we're going to pay for it.
Right.
I know at least one person, and this is strictly anecdotal, that would pay any amount of taxes to not give up a square foot of open space.
Well, I'm sure
And-
they're not alone.
And the person is middle income, modest home,
Well, that's fine.
nothing grandiose at all.
I'm sure there's a tipping point there, but.
Well, yeah, but,
Rest assured, there are lots of plans afoot, especially over in the Green Meadow Farm area, right? Everybody know the Greenbelt has a
Yep,
big set of plans. Don't know if they're gonna reach it, but we'll see.
well, they're pretty close.
Right.
They are.
So, and unfortunately, they're not doing a cost-benefit analysis, so it removes yet another piece of land that could potentially be generating tax revenue, which puts pressure on the remaining properties to generate more revenue. I
Right.
mean, we are at a point, we will hit a tipping point where we will have to get to look at and start overrides unless we generate more tax revenue. So it's like, it's all well and good that people don't have to do any kind of tax benefit analysis of taking 10, 15, 30 acres out of the tax base, but when you're trying to develop something, you have to. So it's kind of like, it's not really a balanced discussion, but it should be. It should be
Oh, it
part
absolutely
of,
should be.
it should be
Absolutely
part of
should
the
be.
discussion, but it's not.
No, you hear ramblings of that when something like that happens, whether it's at Patton or wherever, that, oh, we're taking something else off the tax roll, but, it usually gets lost in the weeds.
So maybe that should be included in the cost-benefit analysis, not just different kinds of housing type, but removing agricultural, removing land from the tax rolls and putting it into conservation.
Well, yeah, you're taking away more developable land in those cases, right? Well, potentially developable land, now it's not developable.
Right.
And you had that statistic, right, of, during the presentation of what's really available to develop.
Yeah.
And it's pretty small.
Yeah.
It's probably it's probably under 1,000 acres and that doesn't, that's not even doing sort of whether that land is actually, how much of that can you develop based
Right.
on wetlands and, but unfortunately, when people take that, let's say Greenbelt buys the patent property, they don't have to do anything. So that's not a requirement. So that just sort of happens and, it continues to shrink the tax base, so, which means we'll be paying more at some point.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Anyway,
So, all right. Anything else on that?
Not that I know of.
I mean, we'll just have to, I think, fairly soon start looking at what we want to tackle, when we want to tackle it. And, you know, in terms of bylaws and, you know, I think that's a good one to start, you know, looking at soon and then figuring out who we can get to do a fiscal analysis.
To back up a minute, is it possible for one of you people to give an overview of what is going on with Greenbelt and,
All I know is that they're purchasing all that land in Hamilton and Topsfield. That was part of the Patton, you know, the Green Meadows Farm.
okay, Greenbelt is gonna purchase
Greenbelt
it.
is buying it, yes.
Okay,
They are,
It also includes the land on the other side of Asbury Street,
yes,
some
correct.
Grapevine Hill or.
Yeah, there's blueberry, there's tons of blueberries over there, but yeah, that includes all that, yeah.
Includes the land that goes well back behind Green Meadow and slopes down to the river.
Yep. Yeah, kind of-
Some of that's already conserved. I'm
Yeah.
not quite sure I see the rationale for buying it, but, yeah, it's a big chunk of change.
Yeah,
Yes.
yep. But they're 80% raised already, I believe,
Yep.
so, something like that.
okay, because I had heard that the guy who was, I think his name is Abbott, was here and fighting that, was gonna buy that, was trying to buy it or something, I don't know. That's obviously not the case.
This is a much better scenario for him, I'd
Yeah, he doesn't have to, he gets,
It will be a package from many sources. There will be state money, there will be land trust money, probably TPL money.
Yeah, that I get.
And maybe the abutters will contribute some money too.
I think you're
And
probably right.
they'll all put it together and buy this package.
Mhm. Yep, exactly. Okay.
How much money is that taken off the tax roll?
I was thinking about that, and I don't know, I mean, it was farmland. I mean, the majority of it, I think, was farmland, so it has a reduced rate anyway, so I don't know what the actual tax hit on that was.
Probably, given that much of it is conserved, and then you have stuff that's farmland, so that
That's
gets
not a
the
lot.
60A exemption.
61A, yeah.
Yeah, it's probably contributing very, very little now. Almost none.
But there are houses on
Well,
that property.
No,
Oh, it's not?
no. Remember, he came with the A&R to split the house off of it? So there's two houses before you get to, between the Patton
Yeah.
homestead and the farm, there's a couple houses that are the Pattons, I believe, at least one of them. And then all that land is just, it's farmland, and then across the street, which is the blueberries and whatever else is over there.
Yeah, there's some farmland over there too.
Yeah.
And a tennis
I
court.
know we also discussed at the meeting if there was anything we could do to develop an expanded industrial district down where our industrial overlay currently is. Maybe get another study, how much is wet, how much is not.
well, I've talked to,
Buy some of it, do something to help generate some kind of industrial base down there.
Mhm.
We're down, where
the
are you
dump.
talking?
The old-
Where the
dump.
old dump was.
Well, that goes back to
that
Patrick,
discu-
it's
that
gotta
dis-
be,
that discussion needs to follow having that land surveyed.
yep,
Independent, objective, civil engineering analysis to determine what, if anything, is available. Because all the rest of this is just hyperbole. You know, I've heard various people, oh, we can do all this, we can do that, but nobody has the facts. Nobody has a base of information to make a realistic decision about. I mean, we tried it ass backwards, and it was based on the selectmen saying, hey, let's zone it commercial and let's see, and put out a bid and see if a commercial, you know, a developer will come in and figure that out on their own and, you know, bid on it and develop it. Well, nobody
You have to be a little more proactive in that if you really, really want.
nobody wanted to do that. So,
Yeah, I mean, having sat on the dump committee for a year or two, it's a pretty tall order, I think, to do much of anything out there, and if there is anything, it's very small.
yeah.
But
I think a more interesting discussion will be expanding the commercial district in the downtown.
Right.
back to the dump area, could it be turned into a park? Could it be
Well-
turned into a
Well,
recreation
the
park?
problem
Walking or
is, the
something?
problem is you've got the solar field out there now.
Yeah,
You've got the gun club.
okay,
You've got, you know, two parts of that, the regular range and then the skeet range. you know, so that's already a use there. I mean, then there's a lot of wet area. So I don't know, you know.
Whether it's even feasible.
Yeah, and it's like out on the edge of town, you know. I don't know. I don't know how much it would get used. I mean, there's already tons of trails out in that general area between 22 and there, right?
Yeah,
And there's
yeah.
trails out through there. I don't know. You want to walk through a solar field and have some grass on it, and that's a park? I don't know.
Pretty
right?
boring.
Yeah, yeah, maybe. And so I haven't walked the entire thing, but I don't think the gun club's going anywhere anytime soon. I don't know what their terms are, if they lease that or how all that works. I have no idea, but
They've been there forever.
they've been there forever. Yeah. It's kind of a cool amenity to have. For some,
The gun
so,
club.
Yeah. Yeah. I've been out there a couple times. It was a blast. Pun intended.
Wait a minute. No.
So, all right. But yeah, your comment and Darcy's comment the other night of, expanding the commercial district downtown to potentially include Winthrop School, I think that's one that we talk about, in the near future. Saying you'll get pushback from the direct abutters there, but I think it's, it's gonna be a school there for quite a while still. It's just,
That's,
when
well,
it's not,
that's the problem. Anything we try is gonna get pushback.
oh, of course.
Nobody wants anything. Everybody wants it to stay the same, but they don't wanna pay the taxes that are required to keep it the same, so.
Right.
I don't know.
Yep. So, but yeah, that's one for another time. Anything else? We don't have minutes yet from the last.
No,
Meetings,
I think because Peter was going to be, didn't he want to be, somebody remember from the meeting, didn't Peter have comments or something that he,
I think Peter did, right?
yeah, that's what I'm
Yeah.
saying,
On the
Peter.
previous minutes, yeah.
Oh, okay.
He wanted to make edits to it, so, and he's not here, so.
He was gonna read it and come back with some edits if he had any, but he's not here.
So
Okay,
I-
yeah. No, he called me before the meeting, said he couldn't make it tonight. So, all right. This might be the fastest one
Yeah.
we've ever done.
Not even 8 o'clock.
So Dan, do you have any ideas?
Nope.
Any thoughts you want to put before the board?
Nope.
No? So you'd like to stay as long as possible?
Where? On the board?
No, here.
I can add something.
Oh, yeah, you want me, I got it. Motion to end the meeting.
No.
Did you want to add something?
Yeah, open space.
Sorry.
MAPC is going to come and meet with us Thursday morning, this Thursday, from 9 to 10. They're going to give us partially an overview of where they are in terms of producing the plan. Also going to talk about places for recreation use in town. They want to know properties that the town might consider to buy for recreational use. One of them just, stuff like that. So if somebody, wait, hang on just a second. So if you want to come and be entertained, come to the meeting here, 9 o'clock, Thursday morning. Yes.
Can you, would be great is, can MAPC or the Open Space Committee actually try and document all the open space in Hamilton that's either owned by the town, by the trustees of reservations, that are greenbelt properties, that are excluded, because I got it from various sources, but some of these are very clearly delineated and reliable, and others are based on estimates. And we don't have a compendium of documented, here is all the open and protected space in the town, and, somebody has actually run to ground
Okay.
and gotten the facts.
Part of your request is already available, which is a list of all the town-owned properties.
No, I got it. I got that. What I'm looking
that
for
one's
is the
easy. That was easy.
total of all the
Right,
property.
I get that. I know, I'm just,
Yeah.
the rest of it could be done, I suppose. I've heard people talk about it.
Can either the Open Space Committee or MAPC take that on?
We'll talk
It
about
would
it.
be just great to have a reliable
Yeah.
source so that if we have this discussions, you can say, we've done the homework, here's the actual number.
Are you also talking about, like, private property that has protections put on it as well? Conservation restrictions? Or are you just talking?
Not 61A properties, because
Just
those
kind
are
of-
not permanently protected.
Right, but like conservation restrictions?
Yes, that would be good.
Okay.
Everything that restricts any future development, just so we have a real number.
Yeah.
A real number of non-taxable land. A real number of non-taxable land.
Well, that's why I want to include 61A, because they can be voluntarily released and become taxable land. That would be.
That we have a list of.
That would be a component piece of it, because I bet there's a large piece of that. It would be nice to know that and include it, but it's also kind of like, it can sort of migrate back in at some point. Usually it
There's a
doesn't.
list of those somewhere that somebody did not
Oh,
too
yeah,
long ago.
the assessor would
Yeah,
have that.
Yeah.
That would be easy to find. So you could say, well, here's all the permanently protected.
Right.
And here's an adjunct of currently conserved under 61A.
Right.
So.
Which one is 61A, forestry or with
Well,
Agriculture.
it's-
agriculture?
There's
B.
agriculture, forestry, I think there are,
Recreation, agricultural, and
Recreation,
plus,
open
of course,
space.
it's
I thought it
three.
was just
Yeah.
two.
61, 61A, and 61B.
I think you're right, actually.
Yeah, and forestry one only lasts for 10 years.
yeah.
No, actually, when you get those, you have to reapply for them every year.
Which,
Ag-
all of,
And either an agricultural
Yeah, yeah.
or an open space exemption from your property taxes, which is a state-run program, you get assessed at, 1/4 of market value, whatever the formula is, you have to apply every year for that.
Right.
Yeah.
And you
it's-
have to,
And it's rubber stamped.
yeah, I mean,
As long as
you have
you
to sell
document.
like $500 worth of whatever.
Right, if it's
whether
agriculture.
Food or,
Right,
you know,
right.
whatever.
and the other part I know is that the value of the agriculture is determined by current market value of whatever the product is that you're doing agriculture on.
Anyway, so if you could just sort of
See-
pursue
I'll see
that,
what
that
we can
would,
do.
that would be,
I mean, the other reason to do an inventory like this of private land is the school committee is still continually looking for playing fields. And Ipswich made the absolute quintessentially perfect move in buying the polo fields out on Candlebrook. They paid 1.8 million, but they got 40 acres. But what they got was a field that for 30 years had been manicured to be flat as a pancake with, nothing but beautiful grass on it. And, Wednesday afternoon, you can go out there and there's
Yeah.
6 soccer games and a football practice going on. They got their money's worth. But if you think about some of the big properties on Bay Road, just north of the high school, one of which is owned by our esteemed board member here, they're very flat properties
Well,
too.
his is in, I understand.
Most of his is in
I mean, he doesn't want it developed, but, playing fields are different than development.
yeah, but the school committee they could build the turf fields and not need new playing fields, and they don't want to do that. So they've
They
actually,
insist on turf?
no, they've deferred pursuing turf as well. They just don't want to do it.
They don't want to do either.
And they're not going after Long Meadow either.
Right.
So,
Why?
Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, right.
their world is education.
Well, when I was on school committee, it included playing fields,
No, it
because
didn't.
we had a chance to buy the middle property, which was Keating Wilcox, I think for something around $700,000, and couldn't get the funding.
Right.
And we would have bought it,
Oh, I understand.
but that was easily 15 years ago now.
Right. And it's still the issue. It's money.
Yeah. Well, the turf
I know,
fields
the
would
New
be.
York Times had an article about school boards up and down the East Coast are sacrificing athletics, having surcharges for athletics, whatever else, because they're under budget constraints with
Well, yeah,
property tax.
for a long time here, you didn't have to pay to play most sports, but now you do.
Yeah, it was, what was it, up $800 for football?
I
Something
think
like
something like that. Yeah, it varies, but
I think it was over 1,000 at one point.
even my daughter started the middle school this year, and one of them is playing field hockey. And it's like it's not even like a real team. I mean, they play one game against someone else, I think, but it's all like within just like 15, 16 kids that, you know, one of the teachers at Winthrop does, and it's not like any other real sport. It's more like not even intramural. It's not even the right word. It's like clubs, like a club, but it's just with them. And that was still $150 or something, right? It's, I mean, not that's, you know, a lot of money, but it's, you know, you're not getting a ton out of it.
Yeah. So,
All right, so much for so much for that idea.
so do you
Right.
want to propose something now, or do you just want to?
Already did.
It's still on the table.
Oh,
That's true. There was no second, so.
Second.
Second on the motion to adjourn. All those in favor?
aye.
There was never anyone opposed.